I never thought I'd hear those words from my own daughter. "You're nothing without us, Mom." Sarah stood in my kitchen, her expensive handbag casually tossed on my countertop, her manicured finger pointing at my face. Her husband James leaned against the refrigerator, arms crossed, with that smirk I'd grown to despise over the years. My son Michael sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone, pretending not to listen, while his wife Natalie nodded along with Sarah's every word. The four of them had arrived unannounced on a Sunday afternoon, filling my modest home with their designer clothes and judgment. I am Margaret Wilson, 65 years old, and according to my children, completely incapable of managing my own life. At least that's what they'd been telling me with increasing frequency over the past year. "Look at this place," Sarah continued, gesturing around my kitchen with a sweeping arm. "It's falling apart. You can barely keep up with the cleaning. And do you really think you should still be driving at your age?" I remained quiet, my hands folded on my lap. The kitchen was perfectly clean. Maybe not to Sarah's standards, but clean nonetheless. My modest two-bedroom house in Mapleton had been my home for over 30 years. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Or at least that's what I'd always believed. "We're just trying to help you, Mom." Michael finally looked up from his phone. "You're getting older. Things are getting harder. You need us." Need them. Those words hung in the air between us. Did I need them? Or did they need something from me? Natalie checked her watch and sighed dramatically. "We should get to the point. We don't have all day." Sarah nodded. "We've been talking, Mom. All of us. And we think it's time you moved into a senior living community. We found a nice place about 40 minutes from here. It's small, but you don't need much space anyway." "And what about my house?" I asked quietly, speaking for the first time since they'd arrived. James stepped forward. "Well, that's the good news. The housing market is doing really well right now. This place could sell for at least $300,000. That money would help support your care for years." "My care," I repeated. "I see." "Don't be difficult, Mom," Sarah snapped. "This is happening whether you like it or not. We've already spoken to a real estate agent. He's coming on Tuesday to look at the place." I looked at each of their faces. My daughter, once my sweet little girl who picked me wildflowers, now looking at me with barely disguised impatience. My son, who I'd worked 2 jobs to put through college, unable to meet my eyes. Their spouses, who barely knew me but felt entitled to decide my future. What they didn't know was that yesterday, I had received a certified letter that had been sitting in my purse all morning, waiting for the right moment. And suddenly, I realized this was that moment. But what they didn't know would soon change everything. There was a time when Sarah's eyes would light up when I entered a room. I remember her 5th birthday, how she had wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "You're the best mommy in the whole world." I had baked her cake myself, chocolate with strawberry frosting, staying up until midnight to get it perfect after working a full shift at the hospital where I was a nurse. Michael had been a quiet boy, always with his nose in a book. When he was 10, he'd won the science fair with a project we'd worked on together for weeks, building a model of the solar system that took over our dining table. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom," he'd said when they handed him the blue ribbon. We weren't rich, not by any stretch. After their father walked out when Sarah was 8 and Michael was 6, I'd had to learn to make every dollar count. I took extra shifts, packed lunches instead of buying them, and put aside my own dreams of going back to school to become a physical therapist. "I'm so proud of you, Margaret," my mother had told me once. "Raising those children on your own, giving them everything they need. You're stronger than you know." She had slipped me an envelope with $500 inside, her savings from her Social Security checks. I tried to refuse, but she insisted. "For the children's education," she'd said. And that's what I'd used it for, along with every extra penny I could scrape together. I opened college savings accounts for both of them when they were still in elementary school. I contributed to those accounts religiously, sometimes putting in only $25 a month when times were particularly tight, but never missing a month. Our holidays were modest, but filled with traditions. Every Christmas Eve, we would bake cookies and drive around looking at lights, returning home to drink hot chocolate and open one present each. Sarah and Michael would giggle with excitement, and those moments, seeing their happiness, made all the hard work worthwhile. Mom, when I grow up, I want to take care of you the way you take care of us, Sarah had told me once when she was 12, helping me fold laundry on a Sunday afternoon. I had smiled and kissed the top of her head, not knowing how differently things would turn out. The kitchen table where Michael now sat playing with his phone was the same one where I'd helped him with his algebra homework, night after night, until he finally understood. It was where Sarah had cried over her first heartbreak, and where we'd celebrated when she got accepted to college, the first in our family to go. "You've given us everything, Mom," Michael had said at his high school graduation, handing me a card that simply read, "Thank you for the sacrifices you made. I promise to make you proud." Those memories felt distant now, like they belonged to different people in a different life. Over the years, my sacrifices for Sarah and Michael had added up in ways that were difficult to quantify. When Sarah needed braces at 13, I took a second job working weekends at a local drugstore, spending Saturdays and Sundays on my feet after already working 40 hours as a nurse. "You shouldn't work so much, Mom," she had said, admiring her new braces in the mirror. "It can't be healthy." "I'm fine, sweetheart," I'd assured her. "Besides, that smile is worth it." The truth was, I was exhausted all the time, but I never let them see it. During those years, I put $15,000 toward orthodontist bills while still managing to add to their college funds. When Michael's school recommended a special program for gifted students, a summer camp that cost $3,000, I sold the small collection of jewelry my grandmother had left me. The gold bracelet, the pearl earrings, the silver locket with her picture inside, all of it went to ensure Michael could have that opportunity. "These kids are going to go on to great things," the program director had told me as I wrote the check with slightly trembling hands. "You're investing in his future." College expenses were the biggest sacrifice. Despite the savings accounts I'd started, tuition costs far exceeded what I had managed to save. Sarah chose an expensive private university, requiring $35,000 beyond what her scholarships covered. I took out a home equity loan to cover it, extending my mortgage by 15 years. For Michael's education, a state school with a renowned engineering program, I liquidated my modest retirement account, paying a hefty penalty in taxes, $42,000 gone from my future to secure his. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Wilson?" my financial advisor had asked with concern. "You're sacrificing your own retirement security." "They're worth it," I'd said with conviction. "They'll be successful and help me later if I need it." When Sarah graduated and got her first job in marketing, she wanted to look the part in her new corporate environment. I gave her $7,000 for a professional wardrobe and helped her with the security deposit on her first apartment, another $3,500. For Michael's wedding to Natalie, I contributed $22,000, nearly all of my remaining savings. "It's your special day," I told them, "and I want it to be perfect." I wore a dress I already owned and had altered rather than buying something new. When Sarah and James were struggling to come up with a down payment for their first house, I offered $25,000, money I had planned to use to finally renovate my aging kitchen. "You're a lifesaver, Mom," Sarah had said, hugging me tightly. "We'll pay you back someday. I promise." That someday never came. Neither did repayment of the $18,000 I lent Michael and Natalie when their roof needed emergency replacement, or the $10,000 I gave Sarah when she was between jobs for 4 months. All told, over the decades, I had given them more than $200,000, money saved through countless small sacrifices. Vacations never taken, clothes not bought, dinners out declined, home repairs postponed. My own dreams deferred again and again. What had begun as necessary support for young children had somehow evolved into an expectation that Mom would always provide, always give, always sacrifice. Even now, when they were in their 30s with good jobs and I was approaching retirement with depleted savings. Looking back, I should have noticed the shift in their attitudes sooner. The warning signs were there, subtle at first, then increasingly obvious. It started about 3 years ago, after I retired from nursing. I had planned a 2-week trip to Italy, my dream vacation that I'd been saving for little by little over a decade. "Is that really a good use of your money, Mom?" Sarah had asked when I told her about my plans. "At your age, shouldn't you be saving for emergencies?" I had laughed it off then. "I'm only 62, Sarah, and I've been saving for this trip for years." "Well, don't come to us if you run out of money," she had said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I had taken my trip anyway, but her comment stayed with me, casting a small shadow over my enjoyment. A few months later, Michael stopped by unexpectedly while I was sorting through some old photographs. "Mom, I'm worried about you living here alone," he said, looking around critically. "This house has so many stairs. What if you fall?" "I've been managing these stairs for 30 years, I replied. "My knees work just fine." He shook his head. "You're not getting any younger. Maybe you should think about downsizing to something more appropriate." The word appropriate hung in the air, loaded with implications about my age and capabilities. My neighbor Ellen noticed the change in their behavior before I fully admitted it to myself. One Sunday after they had visited, she came over with a pie. "I couldn't help overhearing Sarah yesterday," she said carefully as we sat at my kitchen table. "She was speaking to you like you're already senile. Is everything okay?" "They're just concerned," I defended, though uncertainty had begun to creep in. "Concern is fine, Margaret. Condescension is not," Ellen replied, her eyes sharp beneath her gray curls. "And they seem very interested in your house lately." She was right. Their questions about my finances became more frequent. They began showing up unannounced to check on me, scrutinizing my housekeeping and commenting on every minor repair needed. "That loose handrail is dangerous, Mom," Michael had pointed out, though it had been that way for years. "This whole place is becoming a hazard." When I mentioned using some savings to fix the back deck, Sarah immediately objected. "That's such a waste of money on this old house. You should be saving every penny." "For what?" I had asked. "For your care later, of course," she answered as if it were obvious. "Nursing homes are expensive." During family dinners, they began excluding me from conversations, talking around me rather than to me. If I offered an opinion on current events or politics, they would exchange looks and change the subject. Last Christmas, instead of asking what I wanted, they gave me practical gifts: a medical alert bracelet, slip-resistant bath mats, pill organizers. When I opened them, Sarah beamed as if she'd given me diamonds. "See how much we care about your safety, Mom?" The most telling incident occurred 2 months ago. I had driven to Sarah's house for dinner and overheard her talking to James in the kitchen before I announced my arrival. "The real estate agent says houses in Mom's neighborhood are selling above asking price right now," she was saying. "If we could convince her to sell soon—" They fell silent when they realized I was there, but the damage was done. They weren't just concerned about my welfare. They had plans for my assets. A week later, I discovered they had scheduled a meeting with an elder law attorney without telling me. Sarah called to remind me about it, presenting it as if we had already discussed it. "Don't forget, Mom, we're meeting Mr. Peterson tomorrow at 2 o'clock. He's going to help us set up your power of attorney and discuss options for your house." When I told her I had no recollection of agreeing to this and would not be attending, she became agitated. "This is exactly why we need to take control, Mom. Your memory is slipping." My memory was perfectly fine. What was slipping away was my children's respect for me as an independent adult. The final warning came last month when I overheard Michael on the phone with what sounded like a senior living facility. "Yes, she'll be selling her home to finance her stay," he was saying. "My sister and I will be handling the arrangements. Our mother isn't really capable of making these decisions anymore." I'd stood silently in the hallway, my heart pounding with a mixture of hurt and something else. Something that felt surprisingly like anger. What began as occasional comments had evolved into a coordinated campaign. Sarah and Michael, with their spouses as eager accomplices, had clearly decided that my house and whatever savings I had left should be under their control. Their approach was systematic: First, they worked to undermine my confidence in my own abilities. Sarah would move my belongings around during visits, then point out when I couldn't find them. "See, Mom, your memory isn't what it used to be," she would say with exaggerated concern. Michael would ask me the same questions repeatedly during different visits, then claim I had given contradictory answers. "Last week you said you paid the electric bill, but now you're saying you haven't. This is exactly what we're worried about." In truth, they were referring to different months' bills, and I had answered correctly both times. James took control of fixing small things around my house, tasks I usually handled myself or hired someone to do. After replacing a light fixture, he presented me with an itemized list of other, urgent repairs. "The place is falling apart, Margaret," he said, shaking his head. "These repairs would cost at least $20,000. Is that really how you want to spend your limited savings?" The repairs were minor: a dripping faucet, some peeling paint, a squeaky floorboard, certainly not $20,000 worth. Natalie's role was perhaps the most insidious. She began bringing over brochures for assisted living facilities, leaving them casually on my coffee table. "I was just driving past Sunshine Meadows and picked this up," she would say innocently. "They have such nice activities for seniors." The facilities were always described as cozy, code for tiny apartments at exorbitant monthly rates. They began excluding me from family gatherings, then expressing concern about my isolation. When I mentioned visiting my sister in Arizona, all four of them objected strenuously. "You can't travel alone anymore, Mom," Sarah insisted. "What if something happened?" "No, it's better if you stay close to home where we can keep an eye on you." Their control extended to my social life as well. When my friend Diane invited me to join a book club, Michael questioned whether I could keep up with the reading, despite the fact that I read a novel a week. The most alarming escalation came when Sarah suggested I add her name to my bank accounts. "It's just practical, Mom," she said casually over coffee. "If something happened to you, we would need access to pay your bills." "I have a will and my attorney has all the necessary documents," I replied. Her face hardened slightly. "A will only helps after you're dead. We're talking about managing things while you're alive, but unable." The unspoken implication was clear. They were preparing for a time when they would declare me incompetent. Whether such a time would come naturally or be manufactured by them remained the question. Last week they crossed a line. I returned from grocery shopping to find Sarah and Michael in my house, with a man they introduced as just a friend who knows about real estate. "We were showing him around," Michael said vaguely when I asked why they were there. The friend handed me his business card as he left. "Jason Miller, real estate appraiser." They had arranged for my house to be appraised without my knowledge or consent. That evening, I received a call from a lawyer I didn't know, asking to confirm an appointment Sarah had made for me to sign power of attorney documents. "Your daughter was very clear that this needed to happen quickly," the lawyer said. I canceled the appointment and sat in my kitchen, staring at the walls that had witnessed my children grow up, the countertops where we had baked birthday cakes, the doorframe where I had marked their heights with pencil lines. They wanted it all, not just my possessions and my house, but my autonomy, my very self. The certified letter arrived on a Thursday morning. It was from Simmons, Blackwell, and Associates, a law firm I'd never heard of. My hands trembled slightly as I signed for it, wondering what new problem had found its way to my doorstep. Inside was a formal letter on heavy cream-colored stationery. "Dear Mrs. Wilson, our firm has been instructed to contact you regarding the estate of Robert Wilson. As the executor of Mr. Wilson's will, it is my duty to inform you of certain provisions that have recently come into effect. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss this matter. Sincerely, Jonathan Blackwell, Esquire, Robert Wilson, my ex-husband, the man who had walked out on his family nearly 30 years ago, saying he needed to find himself. The man who had paid the minimum required child support and rarely bothered to see his children. The man who had effectively disappeared from our lives." I sat down at my kitchen table, staring at the letter. Robert had never been reliable about anything. Why would his death be any different? Why would he remember us in his will at all? I called the number on the letterhead, half expecting it to be some kind of scam. But Jonathan Blackwell sounded legitimate and professional. Mrs. Wilson, thank you for calling. I understand this must come as a surprise. Would you be able to come to our office tomorrow to discuss the matter in person? It's rather substantial. Substantial. The word hung in the air after we ended the call. What could be substantial about Robert's estate? He had been a mid-level sales manager who couldn't even be bothered to attend his children's graduations. The next morning, I drove to the law office in the city, a sleek building with a marble lobby. Jonathan Blackwell was a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind expensive glasses. Mrs. Wilson, thank you for coming, he said, gesturing for me to sit in one of the plush chairs facing his desk. What I'm about to share may be quite surprising. He explained that after leaving us, Robert had moved to Texas and eventually started a company that specialized in components for oil drilling equipment. The company had done extraordinarily well, and Robert had sold it 5 years ago for a considerable sum. Robert never remarried and had no other children, Mr. Blackwell continued. When he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer last year, he began to reflect on his life choices. Robert had died 3 months ago. In his final year, according to Mr. Blackwell, he had expressed deep regret about abandoning his family. He knew he could never make up for what he'd done, the lawyer said, but he hoped that providing for you and his children financially might offer some small atonement. Then came the revelation that left me speechless. Robert had left his entire estate to be divided as follows: 50% to me, 25% to Sarah, and 25% to Michael. The total value of the estate after taxes is approximately $8.4 million, Mr. Blackwell said matter-of-factly. I must have looked faint, because he quickly poured me a glass of water. That would mean I couldn't even finish the sentence. Your share is approximately 4.0 million, Mrs. Wilson. And there's something else. Mr. Blackwell slid a sealed envelope across the desk. My name was written on it in handwriting I hadn't seen in decades, but instantly recognized. Robert asked that I give you this letter personally. With shaking hands, I opened it. Margaret, there are no words to justify what I did to you and our children. I was selfish, immature, and wrong. You deserved better than a husband who ran away when things got difficult. Sarah and Michael deserved better than a father who chose absence over responsibility. You raised our children alone, with dignity and love. I've had investigators keep me informed over the years. Another cowardly act, watching from afar instead of participating. I know about the double shifts, the second jobs, the sacrifices. I know everything you did for them while I did nothing. The money I'm leaving cannot buy forgiveness, nor should it. But it might buy you freedom. Freedom from worry. Freedom to finally live for yourself after decades of living for others. There's one condition to this inheritance that Blackwell will explain. I added it not to control you from the grave, but to protect you. I'm sorry, Margaret. Not a day went by that I didn't regret leaving. Robert. I looked up at Mr. Blackwell, who was watching me carefully. What's the condition? I asked. Mr. Wilson was aware that your children had become financially dependent on you in their adult years, despite their own successful careers. He was concerned they might attempt to control this inheritance. Mr. Blackwell explained that the condition was simple but non-negotiable. I could not give any portion of my inheritance directly to Sarah or Michael during my lifetime. Beyond gifts of $15,000 per year, I could spend it on myself, donate to charity, or leave it to them in my will. But I could not give them large sums while I was alive. If you violate this condition, your portion of the inheritance reverts to a charitable foundation Robert established, the lawyer explained. And my children's portions? I asked. They receive their shares without conditions. Robert felt that as your children approached 40, they should be responsible for their own financial decisions. As I drove home, my mind was reeling. $4 million. Freedom. And the irony that it came from the man who had abandoned us was not lost on me. But there was something else, something that made my stomach twist. The timing of my children's sudden concern about my living arrangements, their interest in my house, their attempts to control my finances. Had they somehow learned about the inheritance before me? I thought back to that overheard phone call when Sarah was discussing selling my house. She had mentioned something about everything falling into place soon. I pulled into my driveway, turned off the engine, and sat there, a terrible suspicion forming in my mind. Before going inside, I called Mr. Blackwell again. "Is there any possibility my children already knew about the inheritance?" I asked. "Could someone have informed them before you contacted me?" His hesitation told me everything. "I should not speculate," he said carefully. "But I am aware that Mr. Wilson's former business partner attended the funeral in Houston 3 months ago. I believe your children were also present." My children had attended their father's funeral without telling me. They had known about the inheritance for months. And suddenly, they were very concerned about my living arrangements and financial management. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. That evening, I made a pot of tea and spread out everything I could find related to my interactions with Sarah and Michael over the past 3 months. Calendar entries of their visits, notes I'd made after conversations, brochures they'd left, and a journal I'd been keeping since retiring. The timeline was damning. 2 days after Robert's funeral, which they had told me they were attending for closure, Michael had made his first comment about my house being too much for me to maintain. A week later, Sarah had brought up the idea of me moving to a senior facility. I found an email from Sarah sent to both Michael and me about a family dinner. In it was a strange line. "We should discuss the future arrangements before Mom makes any decisions we might regret." I had assumed at the time she meant holiday plans. Now I wondered if they knew exactly how much I was inheriting and if they had been planning how to access those funds all along. The next morning, I called my friend Ellen, who had been a paralegal for 40 years before retiring. "I need your help," I said, explaining the situation. "I need to know if they've taken any legal steps already." Ellen helped me draft letters to my bank, my mortgage company, and the county records office, requesting information about any recent inquiries or access attempts regarding my accounts or property. "This feels paranoid," I said as we sealed the envelopes. "It's not paranoia if they're really after your money," Ellen replied grimly. "Better safe than sorry." I also called a security company to change the locks on my house and asked about installing cameras. "Had a break-in?" the locksmith asked sympathetically. "No," I said. "Just some family issues." He nodded knowingly. "Say no more. We see it all the time with older folks. Children get impatient for their inheritance." The following week brought confirmations of my worst suspicions. My bank reported that Sarah had inquired about becoming a joint account holder, claiming she had my permission to discuss the account. The mortgage company noted that someone had called asking about the payoff amount for my loan, not identifying themselves as me, but asking for information about Margaret Wilson's mortgage. Most disturbing was the response from the county records office. A title search had been conducted on my property 3 weeks ago, requested by Miller Real Estate Appraisals, the company owned by the friend who had been in my house. I took these documents to a lawyer of my own choosing, Patricia Hernandez, who specialized in elder law. "Based on what you're showing me," she said after reviewing everything, "your children appear to be laying groundwork for a potential guardianship action." Guardianship? The word sent a chill through me. It's a legal mechanism where someone is appointed to make decisions for a person deemed incapable of managing their own affairs, she explained. "The problem is, once initiated, these proceedings can be difficult to fight, especially if family members are united in claiming you're incompetent." "But I'm not incompetent," I protested. "I can see that," she smiled. "But courts sometimes err on the side of caution, especially when adult children present a united front expressing concern." She advised me to gather evidence of my mental and physical competence immediately, a complete medical evaluation, financial records showing my responsible management, and documentation of my independent daily living. "And don't confront them yet," she warned. "Let them think their plan is working while we prepare your defense and countermeasures." I left her office with a strategy and a renewed sense of purpose. The hurt of my children's betrayal was profound, but now anger was providing clarity. I would protect myself. Within 2 weeks, I had assembled a substantial file, a clean bill of health from my doctor, including a cognitive assessment scoring well above average for my age, bank statements showing regular responsible transactions, documentation of my volunteer work teaching reading at the local elementary school twice weekly, and statements from friends and neighbors attesting to my independence and mental acuity. I also went through all my financial records and documented every penny I had given Sarah and Michael over the years. The total was staggering even to me, $218,456. Money that had come from my hard work, my sacrifices, and my trust in their promises to pay me back someday. While gathering this evidence, I discovered something else. In my files was a birthday card from Sarah 3 years earlier. Inside, she had written, "Mom, I know Michael and I haven't been great about paying back what you've lent us over the years, but don't worry, we'll take care of you when you're old. That's better than repayment, right? Love you. Taking care of me." So that was the plan. They would take care of me by taking control of my assets, including the unexpected inheritance, under the guise of concern for my welfare. I added the card to my evidence file and continued preparing for the confrontation I knew was coming. The Sunday of their ambush visit marked a turning point. Their behavior had moved from subtle manipulation to overt control, from expressions of concern to direct declarations of what would happen to me and my home. But even I was shocked by how quickly things escalated once I quietly refused to cooperate with their plans. "The real estate agent is coming Tuesday," Sarah had announced. When I calmly replied that I would not be meeting with any agent because I had no intention of selling my home, her face hardened. "This isn't a discussion, Mom. This is happening. You're not capable of living alone anymore." "I'm perfectly capable," I replied, "and this house is in my name. No one can sell it without my consent." Michael stepped in, using the reasonable tone he had perfected. "Mom, we're trying to help you before something happens. What if you fall? What if there's a fire? You're all alone here." "I have neighbors, friends, and an emergency response system if needed," I pointed out. "And I'm in excellent health." "That's not what your doctor says," Sarah said smugly. I stared at her in shock. "You've spoken to my doctor?" "We're your emergency contacts," she shrugged. "We have a responsibility to stay informed about your health." I made a mental note to change my emergency contacts and to ask Patricia about possible HIPAA violations. "Listen," James interjected, "we've already found a great place for you. Sunshine Meadows has an opening next month. We've put down a deposit to hold it." "Without consulting me?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "Because we knew you'd be difficult," Sarah snapped. "You're being selfish, Mom. We have our own families to think about. We can't be worrying about you all the time." "I've never asked you to worry about me," I said. "You don't have to ask." Sarah's voice rose. "It's our responsibility, but you're making it impossible by being stubborn." Natalie, who had been mostly quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Margaret, Sarah and Michael have children to put through college soon. They can't afford to keep supporting you and handling all your expenses." I nearly laughed at the absurdity. "They don't support me. I've never asked them for a dime." "Oh, here we go." Michael rolled his eyes. "Convenient memory loss about the money we've given you over the years." In that moment, I realized they were creating a fictional narrative, one where they supported me financially rather than the truth, which was entirely the opposite. "I think it's time for you all to leave," I said quietly. Sarah stood, looming over me where I sat. "You're nothing without us, Mom," she hissed. "Nothing. You'd be lost. Alone. You need us far more than we need you." Her words were meant to wound, to reinforce my dependence on them. 20 years ago, they might have worked. Today, they only strengthened my resolve. After they left, I called Patricia Hernandez. "They're moving faster than we anticipated," I told her. "They claim to have put a deposit on an assisted living facility for me." "Don't worry," she assured me. "They can't force you into any facility against your will without a court order, which they don't have." Still, we agreed to accelerate our plans. Patricia would prepare a cease and desist letter, formally notifying them that I was aware of their actions and was prepared to take legal measures to protect myself if necessary. "And what about the inheritance?" I asked. When do I tell them I know? Not yet, she advised. Right now, let them think their only obstacle is convincing you to sell your house. We'll reveal the inheritance information at the right strategic moment. The next day, I changed the locks on my house and installed a simple security system with cameras. I notified my doctor's office in writing that no information was to be shared with my children without my explicit written consent. I changed my emergency contacts to Ellen and another close friend. Just in time, as it turned out. 2 days later, Sarah showed up with a woman she introduced as Karen from Sunshine Meadows, who wanted to assess my needs. I'm not interested in an assessment, I said, standing in the doorway without inviting them in. And in the future, please don't bring strangers to my home without asking first. Sarah's face flushed with anger. You're being ridiculous. Karen is a professional who helps seniors like you transition to appropriate care facilities. I don't need care, I replied firmly. And I'm not transitioning anywhere. Mom, Sarah lowered her voice to a threatening whisper. You're making this much harder than it needs to be. We can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way. Is that a threat? I asked, loud enough for the woman from Sunshine Meadows to hear clearly. Sarah forced a laugh. Of course not. I'm just concerned about you. Living all alone in this big house, it's not safe. I feel perfectly safe, I replied. At least I did until recently. I closed the door, locked it, and watched through the peephole as Sarah stood fuming on my porch for several minutes before finally leaving. That night, I received a text from Michael. You're making a big mistake, Mom. We're trying to help you before the situation gets worse. Don't force us to take more drastic measures. I showed the text to Patricia the next morning. She classified it as a veiled threat and added it to our growing file. This is actually helpful to us, she explained. They're creating a paper trail of coercive behavior. The next escalation came in the form of a letter, not from my children directly, but from an attorney they had hired. The letter expressed grave concerns about my ability to care for myself and suggested that a voluntary guardianship arrangement would be preferable to more adversarial proceedings. Patricia responded with our prepared cease and desist letter, adding specific references to their attorney's thinly veiled threats. Days later, Sarah and Michael took their manipulations public. They began contacting my friends and neighbors, expressing worry about my mental state. Sarah called me yesterday, Ellen reported. She said you've been behaving erratically and refusing necessary medical care. She asked me to help convince you to get help. My neighbor Tom stopped me as I was checking my mail. Your son came by when you were out. Asked me to keep an eye on you and call him if I saw anything concerning. Said you might be developing dementia. Is everything okay, Margaret? They were attempting to create a narrative of mental decline, building a case for guardianship by recruiting witnesses. Most painful was the call from Pastor Williams at my church. Margaret, I'm a bit concerned. Your children came to see me. They say you're refusing their help and maybe making unsafe decisions. They asked if the church could intervene somehow. I had been a member of that congregation for 20 years. The suggestion that I needed intervention was deeply humiliating. They're after my house and money, Pastor, I said simply. I have legal representation and documentation of my competence if you'd like to see it. As word spread through my social circles about what was happening, most people rallied around me. A few, however, were swayed by my children's performances of concern. Maybe they really are worried about you, my cousin Jean suggested during a phone call. Children don't usually take these steps unless there's a reason. The most aggressive incident occurred when I returned from grocery shopping to find a strange woman in my living room with Sarah. I had not given them permission to enter my home. How did you get in? I demanded. Sarah held up a key. I've always had a spare, Mom. This is Dr. Reynolds. She's a geriatric specialist who makes house calls. I did not request a house call, I said firmly. And you no longer have permission to enter my home without my explicit invitation. Please leave immediately, both of you. See what I mean? Sarah said to the doctor. Paranoid, combative, these are all signs of cognitive decline. What I see, the doctor replied carefully, is that I was brought here under false pretenses. You indicated your mother had requested this evaluation. She turned to me. I apologize, Mrs. Wilson. I would never conduct an assessment without proper consent. After they left, I called a locksmith again and had the locks changed for the second time. That evening, both Sarah and Michael showed up with their spouses, pounding on my door and demanding I open it. "We know you're in there, Mom," Michael shouted. "Open the door or we'll call the police for a welfare check." I didn't respond, but I did record their behavior on my phone through the window. They continued for nearly 30 minutes, growing increasingly agitated before finally leaving. The police did arrive an hour later, responding to their called-in welfare check. "Ma'am, your children reported that you're in danger and refusing necessary medical care," the young officer explained. I invited him in, showed him my medical records, explained the situation, and gave him Patricia's card. "This happens more than you'd think," he said sympathetically before leaving. "Family disputes over elder care. I'll note in my report that you appear perfectly fine and are under legal representation." The final escalation came in the form of certified letters to both me and Patricia. Sarah and Michael had officially filed for an emergency guardianship hearing, claiming I was a danger to myself due to rapidly advancing cognitive decline and vulnerable to financial exploitation. The irony would have been laughable if it weren't so painful. They're requesting temporary emergency guardianship until a full hearing can be scheduled, Patricia explained. They've timed this well. Judge Hamilton is overseeing emergency petitions this month, and he tends to err on the side of caution in these matters. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we need to be fully prepared for the hearing. They'll present their evidence of your alleged incapacity, and we'll present our evidence of your competence." The hearing was scheduled for the following week. In the days leading up to it, I barely slept. The thought of facing my children in court, children I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for, was almost unbearable. But beneath the hurt was a growing resolve. I would not allow them to strip me of my dignity, my autonomy, or my assets, whether they knew about the inheritance yet or not. The emergency guardianship hearing was set for 2:00 p.m. on Tuesday at the county courthouse. Patricia advised me to dress conservatively but comfortably, to speak clearly and calmly, and to address the judge directly when answering questions. "The most important thing," she emphasized, "is to demonstrate your mental competence. Don't get emotional, even if they say hurtful things. Judge Hamilton will be watching your reactions carefully." I chose a simple navy blue dress with a cardigan, pearl earrings, and low heels. I styled my hair neatly and applied minimal makeup. The image in the mirror looked like what I was, a dignified woman in her mid-60s, not someone in need of guardianship. Ellen drove me to the courthouse, offering steady encouragement. "You'll be fine, Margaret. The truth is on your side." The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, with dark wood paneling and the smell of furniture polish. Sarah, Michael, James, and Natalie were already seated with their attorney, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit. They didn't look at me as I entered. Judge Hamilton, a stern man in his 70s, called the court to order precisely at 2:00 p.m. After the initial formalities, Sarah and Michael's attorney presented their petition. "Your Honor, my clients have observed a disturbing decline in their mother's cognitive function and decision-making capacity over the past year. Mrs. Wilson has become increasingly paranoid, rejecting their attempts to help her transition to appropriate care. She refuses to acknowledge her limitations and is making decisions that put her health and financial security at risk." The attorney called Sarah as their first witness. Under oath, my daughter painted a picture of me that I barely recognized. A confused old woman who left burners on, forgot to pay bills, and became disoriented in familiar places. "Last month, she got lost coming home from the grocery store she's been shopping at for 20 years, Sarah claimed, her voice breaking for effect. "When we found her, she was parked at a gas station 2 miles from her house, crying because she couldn't remember the way home." It was a complete fabrication. No such incident had ever occurred. Michael testified next, describing how I had supposedly called him at 3:00 a.m., confused about what day it was, and had become hostile and combative when he gently suggested I might need help. Another complete fabrication. Their attorney submitted statements from two neighbors I barely knew, claiming they had observed me talking to myself in the garden and appearing confused while checking my mail. They presented bank statements showing several late payments on utilities, conveniently omitting that the late payments occurred during a 2-week period when I was visiting my sister in Arizona. Throughout their testimony, I maintained the calm demeanor Patricia had advised, though inside I was seething. These were my children, telling elaborate lies about me under oath. When it was our turn, Patricia methodically dismantled their narrative. She presented my recent medical evaluations, including a cognitive assessment administered just 2 weeks earlier that showed no impairment. She called my primary physician, Dr. Liu, who testified via phone that I was in excellent health for my age, took only minimal medication for mild hypertension, and displayed no signs of cognitive decline during my regular checkups. Ellen testified about our twice-weekly volunteer work teaching reading at the elementary school, hardly an activity someone with dementia could manage. The bank manager from my local branch submitted a written statement confirming I had maintained my accounts in good order for decades, with no unusual activity or concerns. Then Patricia revealed our counter-narrative: the documentation of my children's suspicious activities, the title search on my home, their unauthorized entry, the consultation with a real estate agent without my knowledge, and their veiled threats when I refused to cooperate with their plans. Your Honor, Patricia concluded, this is not about Mrs. Wilson's competence. This is about her children attempting to gain control of her assets, including her home. They have provided no credible evidence of cognitive decline, while we have provided substantial evidence of their concerning behavior. Judge Hamilton looked troubled. I'd like to hear from Mrs. Wilson directly, he said, gesturing for me to take the witness stand. As I was sworn in, I finally made eye contact with my children. Sarah quickly looked away. Michael held my gaze for a moment, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Wilson, the judge began, your children have expressed serious concerns about your ability to care for yourself. How do you respond to their testimony? I took a deep breath. Your Honor, every specific incident they described simply never happened. I have never gotten lost coming home from the grocery store. I have never called Michael confused about what day it was. These are fabrications. That's a serious accusation, the judge noted. Why would your children invent such stories? The moment had come, the breaking point that would change everything. I had discussed this moment with Patricia extensively. We had agreed that full disclosure was now necessary. Your Honor, 3 months ago, my children attended the funeral of their father, my ex-husband Robert Wilson. At that funeral, they learned that Robert had amassed considerable wealth and had named me as a beneficiary in his will. Shortly afterward, they began suggesting I sell my home and move into assisted living. The courtroom fell silent. Sarah's face had gone pale. Michael was staring at the table. I received official notification of this inheritance only recently, I continued. My portion amounts to approximately $4.2 million. My children each receive approximately $2.1 million without conditions. However, there is a condition on my portion. I cannot give large sums directly to my children during my lifetime. I could see the shock on the judge's face. Are you suggesting your children have pursued this guardianship to gain control of your inheritance? Yes, Your Honor, that is exactly what I'm suggesting. And I have evidence that they knew about this inheritance months before I did. Patricia submitted the additional documentation: the timeline correlating their behavior changes with Robert's funeral, the brochures for senior living facilities that appeared immediately afterward, and most damning, a copy of the funeral program showing they had been present, along with Robert's former business partner. Furthermore, I continued, my voice growing stronger, I have documented over $200,000 in financial assistance I have provided to my children over the years, money they have never repaid despite promises to do so. Far from supporting me, as they have claimed, they have repeatedly relied on my financial help while building their own comfortable lives. I turned toward Sarah and Michael directly. You're nothing without me, I said, echoing Sarah's cruel words back to her. That's what you told me. But the truth is the opposite. For years, I supported you, believed in you, sacrificed for you. And this is how you repay that love and trust, with lies and manipulation. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Judge Hamilton was looking at my children with undisguised disapproval. Your Honor, Sarah's attorney began, we had no knowledge of— Save it, counselor, the judge interrupted. I've seen enough. This petition is denied. He looked directly at Sarah and Michael. And I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of potential perjury charges based on your testimony today. He turned to me with a softer expression. Mrs. Wilson, I apologize for what you've been subjected to in these proceedings. This court finds you fully competent to manage your own affairs. As we stood to leave, Michael attempted to approach me. Mom, we can explain— No, I said firmly, looking him directly in the eye. There is nothing to explain. You lied under oath. You tried to have me declared incompetent. You betrayed every sacrifice I ever made for you. Sarah was crying now, whether from remorse or the public humiliation of being caught. I couldn't tell. We'll talk when you're ready to tell the truth, I said, and walked out of the courtroom with my head held high. Outside, in the bright afternoon sunlight, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. My children had tried to take everything from me— my home, my independence, my dignity, and ultimately, my inheritance. They had failed, but the cost was our relationship, perhaps forever. Are you okay? Ellen asked gently. No, I admitted, but I will be. The weeks following the court hearing were strangely quiet. Neither Sarah nor Michael attempted to contact me directly, though I heard through mutual acquaintances that they were devastated by the outcome and claimed to have been misunderstood. Meanwhile, I met with Jonathan Blackwell and his team to finalize the details of Robert's inheritance. The process was surprisingly straightforward, with the funds transferred into newly established investment accounts managed by a reputable firm Blackwell recommended. Mrs. Wilson, the financial advisor said during our first meeting, with proper management, this inheritance will not only secure your retirement, but could grow substantially in the coming years. I had never expected to be wealthy, certainly not at 65 when many of my peers were worried about outliving their savings. The sudden abundance of resources was disorienting. What should I do first? I asked the advisor. Nothing drastic, she advised. Take time to adjust to this new reality. Make no major decisions for at least 6 months. The money will be there when you're ready. It was good counsel. I continued living in my house, following my regular routines, while quietly exploring possibilities for the future. The only immediate change I made was hiring a weekly housekeeping service, a small luxury I had always wanted but never felt I could justify. 3 weeks after the hearing, Patricia called with unexpected news. Sarah and Michael have retained new legal representation, she reported. Their new attorney has requested a meeting with us. They want to discuss a family reconciliation. Do you think it's genuine? I asked, my skepticism evident. Hard to say, Patricia replied. Son, but they're in a difficult legal position. The judge referred their case to the DA for potential perjury charges. A demonstration of family reconciliation could help their situation considerably. I agreed to the meeting, which was set for the following week at Patricia's office, neutral territory. I spent the days leading up to it cycling through emotions: anger, hurt, cautious hope, then back to anger again. When the day arrived, I dressed carefully in a simple but elegant outfit. The message I wanted to convey was clear. I was not broken, not diminished, but neither was I flaunting my new financial status. Patricia greeted me warmly in the lobby. Remember, she said quietly as we walked toward the conference room, you hold all the cards now. Listen to what they have to say, but make no commitments today. Sarah and Michael were already seated at the conference table with their new attorney, a distinguished older man named Thomas Grayson. James and Natalie were noticeably absent. The atmosphere was tense as introductions were made. Michael couldn't meet my eyes. Sarah looked as if she hadn't slept in days. Mr. Grayson spoke first. "Mrs. Wilson, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. My clients wish to express their profound remorse for their actions and begin a process of making amends, if you're willing to hear them out." I nodded, but said nothing. Michael spoke next, his voice unsteady. "Mom, what we did was inexcusable. We lied in court. We tried to take control of your life. There's no justification for it." "We were wrong," Sarah added, tears already forming. "So terribly wrong. We betrayed your trust in the worst possible way." "Why?" I asked simply. It was the question that had haunted me through sleepless nights. "After everything I've done for you both, why would you do this?" They exchanged glances, and I could see their reluctance to fully acknowledge the truth. "The complete truth, please," I said firmly. "No more manipulation." Michael sighed deeply. "When Dad died, his business partner told us about the inheritance. He mentioned it would be millions, but he didn't know the exact amount or conditions. We saw an opportunity. We convinced ourselves we deserved it," Sarah continued, staring at her hands. "After all, he had abandoned us. The money should rightfully be ours, we thought, when we learned there would be conditions on your portion. You decided to have me declared incompetent so you could control it all," I finished for her. "Yes," she whispered. "It sounds so horrible saying it out loud, but that was our plan." "And the fabricated incidents of memory loss? The lies about me getting lost or calling confused in the middle of the night?" Michael looked genuinely ashamed. "Complete fabrications. We researched symptoms of early dementia and created incidents that would fit the pattern." The cold calculation of it took my breath away. These were my children, whom I had raised to be honest, compassionate people. "What about the money I've given you over the years?" I asked. "The college tuition, the down payments, the emergency funds. Did you ever intend to repay any of it?" Sarah shook her head. "We told ourselves it was what parents are supposed to do, that you owed us that support." The honesty, however painful, was refreshing after months of lies. Mr. Grayson interjected gently. "Mrs. Wilson, my clients understand the severe breach of trust they've committed. They're prepared to face legal consequences for their perjury. However, they hope that with time and demonstrated change, some form of family relationship might be salvaged." Patricia spoke up. "And what form might that take? What exactly are they proposing?" "First," Michael said, "we want to issue a formal apology, in writing, acknowledging everything we've done. Second, we're prepared to sign legally binding agreements never to attempt to control Mom's finances or living arrangements again. Third," Sarah added, "we want to begin making repayments on the money you've given us over the years. We've both calculated what we owe, with interest. We can't repay it all at once, but we'll set up payment plans." I was surprised by this last offer. "What about your inheritance portions?" I asked. "Robert left each of you over $2 million. Couldn't you repay me from those funds?" They looked uncomfortable again. Michael cleared his throat. We don't actually get those funds for another 3 months. There's a waiting period. And we've already committed much of that money to other obligations," Sarah admitted reluctantly. I almost laughed. Even now they couldn't be completely honest. "You mean you've already spent money you don't yet have?" They both nodded, looking embarrassed. "Mrs. Wilson," Mr. Grayson said, "my clients are also willing to attend family therapy sessions if you'd be open to that approach." I sat quietly for a moment, absorbing everything they had said. The apologies seemed genuine, but I had thought I knew my children well enough to detect their lies before, and I had been wrong. "I need time to consider all of this," I said finally. "I appreciate your honesty today. What I believe is honesty, at least. But trust, once broken, isn't easily rebuilt." "We understand," Michael said quickly. "Take all the time you need." As the meeting concluded, Sarah approached me hesitantly. "Mom, regardless of what you decide about our relationship going forward, I want you to know I'm truly sorry. Not just because we got caught, but because what we did was wrong. I see that now. I looked at my daughter, truly looked at her, and saw beneath the polished exterior to the frightened, morally compromised person she had become. And despite everything, I still loved her. I still loved them both. That love had been wounded, perhaps permanently altered, but it remained. "I'll be in touch," I said, not ready to offer more than that. Outside, walking to my car with Patricia, I felt strangely lighter. "Do you think they're sincere?" I asked her. "Partially," she replied with the frankness I had come to value. "The threat of perjury charges is real, and they know reconciliation would help their case. But I also sense genuine remorse. People can hold mixed motives. What would you do in my position?" She thought for a moment. "I'd proceed cautiously. Accept their written apology and legal assurances, but rebuild the relationship slowly, if at all. Their behavior revealed character flaws that won't disappear overnight." I nodded, knowing she was right. The inheritance had revealed my children's true values in a way that nothing else could have. Money, as the saying goes, doesn't change people. It unmasks them. In the months that followed, a new order began to emerge from the chaos of betrayal. The district attorney ultimately decided not to pursue perjury charges against Sarah and Michael, on the condition that they complete community service and issue formal retractions of their false statements about my mental capacity. Their public retraction was published in the local newspaper, a humbling experience for them, but one I felt was necessary. The community needed to know that the rumors they had spread about my mental decline were false. "We deeply regret making false statements about our mother's cognitive health," the statement read in part. "Margaret Wilson is of sound mind and fully capable of managing her own affairs. Our actions were motivated by financial concerns rather than genuine worry for her welfare." I had insisted on this level of specificity in the retraction. No vague apologies for any misunderstandings. The truth needed to be clear. Both Sarah and Michael began making monthly payments toward their accumulated debt to me. The amounts were modest, $500 from each of them, and at that rate, it would take decades to repay the full amount. But the symbolic value was more important than the money itself. Sarah's marriage to James showed signs of strain in the aftermath. I learned through Ellen that they were in counseling, dealing with issues that had apparently been simmering for years. My newfound wealth had merely been the catalyst for their scheme, not its root cause. Michael and Natalie seemed to be faring better, though Michael had been passed over for a promotion at work, possibly due to the public scandal of our court case. Natalie had taken a full-time position at an accounting firm to help stabilize their finances. As for me, I began crafting a new life, one built around my own choices rather than my children's expectations or needs. The first major decision came 3 months after receiving the inheritance. I decided to sell my house after all, not because anyone was pressuring me, but because I wanted a fresh start. The modest home held too many painful memories now, overshadowing the good ones. With Patricia's help, I found a beautiful 2-bedroom condominium in a vibrant downtown area, walking distance to shops, restaurants, and cultural venues. It was actually more expensive than my old house, a fact that gave me private satisfaction whenever I thought about my children's plans to move me into a cozy facility. I furnished it exactly as I pleased, with an eclectic mix of a few cherished pieces from my old home and new items that reflected my personal taste, rather than practical concerns of raising a family. For the first time in decades, every item in my home was chosen solely because I wanted it there. With Patricia's guidance, I also established a charitable foundation focused on helping single parents pursue higher education, something I had never been able to do myself. We structured it to provide not just financial assistance, but also practical support, like childcare during classes, and mentorship from successful professionals who had been single parents themselves. "The Margaret Wilson Foundation has a nice ring to it," Patricia said as we signed the incorporation papers. "No," I corrected her, "the Fresh Start Foundation. Because everyone deserves a second chance to build the life they want." 6 months after the court hearing, I invited Sarah and Michael, without their spouses, to my new home. Our communication during the intervening months had been limited to brief, carefully worded emails and the occasional phone call. This would be our first face-to-face meeting since the reconciliation discussion at Patricia's office. They arrived exactly on time, bearing housewarming gifts, Sarah with a potted orchid, Michael with a bottle of wine. Both seemed nervous, taking in my new surroundings with surprised expressions. "This is not what I expected," Sarah admitted, looking around at my stylish contemporary space. "It's beautiful, Mom." "Thank you," I said, offering them seats in the living area overlooking the city park below. "This is actually what I wanted all along, to downsize to something more manageable but in a vibrant location." Ironic, isn't it? They both had the grace to look embarrassed. Over a light lunch I had prepared, we talked cautiously at first, staying on safe topics: the unusually warm weather, a new restaurant that had opened nearby, a book I had recently read. Gradually, the conversation turned to more substantive matters. "I've been seeing a therapist," Sarah volunteered. "It's been enlightening. I've had to face some hard truths about myself." "Me too," Michael added. "I never realized how entitled I'd become until all this happened. How I took your support for granted while convincing myself I was self-made." I nodded, acknowledging their efforts but not rushing to offer absolution. "And your spouses? How are they handling everything?" Sarah looked down at her plate. "James and I are separated. Have been for 2 months now. The whole inheritance scheme was largely his idea, though I went along with it eagerly enough. When it all fell apart, our marriage did too. He couldn't handle the public humiliation." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it despite everything. "Natalie and I are working things out," Michael said. "She's actually been really supportive. Said this whole experience was a wake-up call we both needed." When lunch was finished, I invited them to sit on the balcony, where I had prepared coffee and a simple dessert. The view of the park spread out below us, alive with people enjoying the pleasant day. "I've made some decisions I want to share with you both," I said once we were settled. "First, about our relationship going forward." They both tensed visibly. "I'm willing to rebuild a relationship with each of you, but it will be different from before. More balanced, more honest. I will never again be your financial safety net or allow either of you to dictate my choices." They nodded solemnly. "Second, I've established a foundation to help single parents pursue higher education. Much of my inheritance will go toward that work." "That sounds wonderful, Mom," Sarah said sincerely. "Third, I've updated my will. You should know that while I haven't disinherited either of you, I've reduced your portions significantly. Half of my estate will now go to the foundation, with the remaining half divided between you." They exchanged glances, but voiced no objections. "Lastly, I want us to meet like this, just the three of us, once a month for the next year. No spouses, no grandchildren, just us working through our issues directly. If that goes well, we can gradually expand to include others." "I'd like that," Michael said quietly. "Thank you for giving us this chance. I know we don't deserve it." "Everyone deserves a chance to make amends," I said. "But trust will have to be earned back slowly, over time, through actions rather than words." As they prepared to leave, Sarah paused by the door. "I've been wondering something. If Dad hadn't left you that inheritance, if we hadn't shown our true colors so clearly, would you have eventually given in? Moved to that assisted living place? Let us take control?" I considered the question carefully. "Probably," I admitted. "I've always wanted to believe the best of you both. I might have convinced myself your concerns were genuine. In a strange way, Robert's money protected me from you, which is ironic, given how little he protected any of us when he was alive." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "Then perhaps we should be grateful, in a way. This whole terrible experience revealed truths that needed to come to light." After they left, I sat alone on my balcony, watching the lengthening afternoon shadows in the park below. There was sadness in me, yes, for what had been lost, for the innocent trust that would never fully return. But there was something else, too, a profound sense of liberation. For decades, I had defined myself primarily as a mother, measuring my worth by my children's happiness and success, subordinating my needs to theirs. Now, finally, I was free to discover who Margaret Wilson was beyond her role as a mother, what she wanted, what brought her joy, what contribution she could make to the world. It wasn't the retirement I had envisioned, but perhaps it was the one I needed. 2 years passed, bringing changes I could never have anticipated on that terrible day when Sarah spoke those cutting words, "You're nothing without us." The monthly meetings with my children evolved gradually from tense, careful conversations to more genuine interactions. We never recaptured the easy closeness of earlier years. That was impossible after what had happened. But we developed something new, a relationship between adults with clear boundaries and mutual respect. Sarah's divorce from James was finalized, and she moved to a smaller apartment, taking a higher-paying but more demanding marketing position to maintain financial stability. The experience seemed to humble her in necessary ways. She started volunteering at a women's shelter, teaching job skills and interview techniques. "I'm trying to use my marketing background for something meaningful," she explained during one of our meetings. "These women have been through so much worse than my petty problems." Michael and Natalie stayed together, welcoming a second child the following year. Michael took a step back from his corporate career to be more present for his family, accepting a teaching position at a local college that paid less but gave him more personal satisfaction. "I was chasing success as defined by others," he told me. "Now I'm figuring out what success means to me." Both continued making their monthly payments toward what they owed me, never missing a month despite financial adjustments in their lives. I placed these payments in a separate account, unsure what I would ultimately do with the money. The Fresh Start Foundation thrived beyond my expectations. We provided scholarships to 23 single parents in our first year, 35 in the second. I took an active role in mentoring recipients, drawing on my own experience. This work brought me more satisfaction than I had known possible, creating meaning from the hardest chapters of my life. I developed new friendships through the foundation and various community activities. I joined a hiking group for seniors, surprising myself with my stamina on challenging trails. I took watercolor classes, discovering a modest talent and immense pleasure in creating art. I attended theater performances, concerts, and lectures, cultural experiences I had always deferred in favor of more practical concerns. One particular friendship deserves special mention. Robert Finch, a retired English professor I met through a book club. Our relationship developed slowly from intellectual companionship to something deeper. At 68 and 70 respectively, we approached romance with the wisdom of experience, valuing honesty and independence alongside affection. "I never expected to find this kind of connection at our age," Robert said one evening as we walked along the riverfront after dinner. "Neither did I admitted. But I'm grateful for it." Perhaps the most significant change was internal. The woman who had once defined herself through sacrifice and service to others now stood firmly in her own identity. I learned to say no without guilt, to pursue my own interests unapologetically, and to value my needs alongside others. Lessons that should have come decades earlier, but were no less precious for their delay. On the second anniversary of receiving Robert Wilson's inheritance, I invited Sarah and Michael, now including their children but not James, to a special dinner at my condominium. I had an announcement to make. After dessert was served, I raised my glass for a toast. 2 years ago, our family faced its greatest crisis. We hurt each other in ways that seemed irreparable at the time. But we've worked hard to build something new from those ruins, and for that, I'm deeply grateful. Sarah and Michael raised their glasses in silent acknowledgement. "I've made a decision about the repayment plan you've both faithfully maintained," I continued. "As of today, I'm considering your debts paid in full." They stared at me in shock. "Mom, we've barely repaid a fraction of what we owe you," Michael protested. "The money was never the point," I explained. "The commitment to repayment was what mattered, your recognition of what I had sacrificed, and your willingness to acknowledge that debt. You've demonstrated that commitment consistently for 2 years now." "What will you do with the payments we've already made?" Sarah asked. "They've been placed in trust funds for your children's education," I said, smiling at my grandchildren, "with the stipulation that the money can only be used for educational purposes." There were tears and hugs all around, genuine ones this time, not the manipulative displays of the past. Later, as Michael helped me clear the dishes, he asked quietly, "Do you think you'll ever fully trust us again?" I considered the question carefully. Trust isn't binary, all or nothing. I trust you both more than I did 2 years ago. I trust that you've learned from this experience and grown as people. But the innocence of our earlier relationship can't be recaptured, nor should it be. What we have now is more honest, more balanced. He nodded thoughtfully. For what it's worth, I like who you've become these past 2 years. You seem freer somehow. I am, I replied simply. After everyone had left, I sat alone on my balcony in the soft evening air, reflecting on the strange path my life had taken. Robert's death and the inheritance that followed had catalyzed the most painful experience of my life, and ultimately, the most liberating. I thought about Sarah's cruel words that had once cut me to the core. "You're nothing without us." The truth had proven to be exactly the opposite. It was only when I stopped defining myself through my children that I discovered who I truly was. Not just a mother, but a woman with her own dreams, talents, and purpose. A woman who had value in herself, independent of her role in others' lives. I was not nothing without them. I was, finally, fully myself. As I prepared for bed that night, I glanced at the framed photo on my nightstand, not of my children, as had been my habit for decades, but of myself on a recent hiking trip, standing triumphantly atop a mountain peak, arms raised in victory, face alight with joy. It was my favorite image of myself, strong, independent, and completely alive. Tomorrow, I would meet with the foundation board to review new scholarship applications. The day after, Robert and I had tickets to a jazz concert. Next week, I was flying to Arizona to visit my sister. My calendar was full, my life rich with purpose and connection. The lawyer's letter that had arrived 2 years ago had changed everything. Not just by revealing an unexpected inheritance, but by forcing a painful truth into the light. That truth had broken old patterns and released me from expectations that had confined me for decades. Sometimes, I reflected, freedom comes in unexpected packages. Sometimes the greatest gift is the dissolution of illusions we've clung to for comfort. And sometimes, the most profound act of love is setting firm boundaries that allow both parties to grow. I turned out the light and settled into peaceful sleep, grateful for the painful wisdom of the past 2 years and the promise of the days yet to come. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.